Hey y'all, this is Rob, and I'm telling you a true ghost story. This story happened in the winter of 1982 going into 1983. I was 10 years old, took place in southern Massachusetts, and the other people involved were my cousins, Jeremy, who was a year younger than me, and Brian, who was like 5 years older. I was 10 at the time. So, the house that they lived in, that is the setting for this story, was very, very haunted, clearly haunted. There weren't any, the adults in our lives didn't try to gaslight us into thinking it wasn't haunted. They tried to gaslight us into thinking it was harmless. But the signs were all too clear. There are a number of other stories that I could and probably will tell that would corroborate and support this, but please understand that all of the people involved in this story all had a very good functional understanding of the supernatural nature of what happened in this house. And I think that becomes important as the story goes on. It also makes it even more hilarious. This, by the way, is also the story that I told when I was once asked when I lost my fear of humans. I was 10. So here it goes. I'm 10 years old and I'm at my cousin's house, hanging out with 9-year-old Jeremy. My aunt has gone out for the evening and left us alone there because my older cousin, Brian, is out somewhere with his friends being 15 years old. A couple things about Brian. He was at 15 years old. He was every bit of 6 feet tall, maybe 6'1" by then. And he was batshit crazy. He was a product of his environment as much as anybody else, but he was super impulsive, super violent. And he got creative with his shit sometimes, and we didn't like it. So we had a healthy fear of Brian. We also had a healthy fear of the house. Like I said, a lot had happened up until this point to make it all abundantly clear. But we're kids. We didn't get to decide where we lived. So one night, Jeremy and I are playing with matchbox cars, of all things, in the kitchen. Now, in the house where he lived, that subdivision, we weren't allowed to go into the other parlor, but the key was right there. And here comes Brian in through the front door with a dirt bike. Not like a BMX pedal bike, a motorized dirt bike. And he's tracking snow and dirt all over the floor because it was December and it was nighttime and it was snowing out. He brings this thing inside, wheels it right through the kitchen, opens up the key to the parlor door, and wheels it into the old side of the house, as we refer to it. And that was bad because that was one of the things that would piss the house off. We had come to sort of a detente with it where we didn't get haunted all that much as long as we stayed on our damn side. He knew that. And it's important for the story that you know that he knew that. And we reminded him of that as we followed him and we're like, what are you doing? Don't go over there. What the hell's wrong with you? Risking a beating just for raising our voices to him, but there was a balance to be struck here. Hopefully we weren't going to get struck either. So he told us to go screw ourselves. And he brings the bike over and he parks it in the parlor. Imagine a 30 by 30 room, very large, well furnished, china cabinets along the walls, a 10-seat dining room set in the middle of the room. All very nice. Very old, even then. And he proceeds to tell us about how he got this bike and it's a great deal and this and that and the other, and how he's going to beat the shit out of us if we touch it while he's gone. And he parks the bike in the parlor and he leaves. And we waited a couple of minutes and we went over and I noticed that he had parked the bike up against the wall, the outside wall of the house, in such a way that it was leaning away from the wall with the kickstand pointing down like this. Okay, that becomes important in a minute. So we walk over and we touch the bike, like, you, Brian, this, that. And then we lost interest and we got out of that room and we went and locked the door and started playing with our matchbox cars again. And it was maybe a half hour later. Boom! The bike fell over on the other side of the door. And at that point, we just thought the bike fell over. Maybe it had a bum kickstand or something. We didn't immediately assume it was the house acting up. So we go over there and there's the bike on the floor. And I'm like, well, he told us not to touch it, but He's going to kick the shit out of us if he finds this thing on the floor. So let's put it back up. So we put it back up, and I wiggle it, check and make sure the kickstand is locked in. Went back over, locked the door, start playing with our Matchbox cars. Maybe 15 minutes later, it fell over again. And it was at this point when we kind of looked at each other like, oh man, is this just ordinary weird stuff, or is this the house again? So we go back over, and there's the bike lying over. And I'm still trying to convince myself this could be a bum kickstand. So I says, hey, let's turn the thing around and face it into the wall so that the kickstand will be up against the floorboard. He says he's going to remember he didn't park it like that. And I said, he's going to be hiring giraffe pussy when he gets back. If we can just keep the bike upright, I don't think it's going to matter as much. And even then, at least we'll have a chance to explain. So we turn the bike around, lean it up against the wall, give it a good shake, go back over into the kitchen. 10 minutes later, we hear it fall again. And at this point, we know it's the house, but we still have my cousin Brian to worry about. So we go through again. There's the bike lying on the floor with the kickstand pointing up. Now here's the important part of that. It means that the bike fell from a greater than 90-degree angle. Bikes don't do that by themselves. But we still want to keep this thing upright if we can, without doing whatever else we can to piss off what's going on in the house. So, as the room starts getting colder, my ears pop, I go and I grab a chair and we push the bike up against the wall and put the kickstand down, and I propped a chair up against the bike. One of those what turned out to be $1,000 chairs up against the bike, and we go back over and we lock the door and we wait. And this time it didn't take but 2 minutes. And maybe 2 minutes after we'd gone back into the kitchen, I hear a noise that I can only do an impression of like this. And Jeremy and I stood up and grabbed each other by the shirts. It's, what the fuck was that? For what felt like about a month, but it was probably 4 or 5 seconds. And then we hear the bike fall over again, but it sounds different, more muffled. So we spent the next 5 minutes debating how to proceed, which sounded something like, fuck you, you go look, it's your house. Fuck you, you go look, you're older. Well, we ended up both going over. And he unlocked the door and he opened it. And I shone a flashlight in because I was be damned if I was going to stick my head into that room again. And the bike and the chair were gone. Empty floor. I slowly bring the flashlight beam up. And across the room, I see the chair. 20 feet away in the doorway opposite of where I was standing. And I had 2 thoughts happen almost at once. I thought to myself, oh, that horrible, horrible hissing noise we just heard that sounded like the ghost of a 10,000-pound saber-toothed tiger was just the chair sliding 30 feet across the floor to end up in the other doorway. Phew. And another part of my brain countered with, that's the fucking good news, followed by, and where's the bike? So I kept the beam with the edge on the door frame so I didn't have to stick any part of me I didn't have to through that door. 10 years old, mind you. And I already knew better than to do the silly things the cops did on TV. And I looked at the dining room table, and I looked under the dining room table, and I didn't see the bike, and I looked on top of the dining room table, and I didn't see the bike. I'm not going to lie. I shone the light up on the ceiling over the dining room table to see if the bike was there, because it made as much sense as damn anything else. Wasn't there. And I bring the beam around, and I get to the other corner of the room, and in the next room at the front of the house, I see the dirt bike lying on the floor with its kickstand sticking straight up. looked at it and I said, nope. And we shut the door and we hung up the key and we went to the far side of the house and we put on the TV and turned it up as loud as we could stand it. And we stayed there until about 11 o'clock that night when my older cousin got home, and we greeted him at the door, having lost our fear of humans, and said, hey, before you say anything else, understand you're waiting until tomorrow to go move that bike. This was the guy that we had been concerned about getting internal injuries from a few hours before. But he understood. He knew. And so he meekly replied that he would wait until the morning, and then he joined us in our sofa fort that we slept in for the night. And in the morning, he moved to the bike. And there were other stories after that. But those are other stories.